my name is Susana Tran. I'm Vietnamese American. I was born in Massachusetts in the United States, and I was raised in Boston.
I'm Adam Bakshi, and I'm a junior at UMass Boston. I was born in New York City, United States of America, and I was raised for the first 3 years of my life in Buffalo, and the other 19 in Boston, Massachusetts.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Bui. I'm Vietnamese American, and I'm a sophomore management major in Constitution and Accounting.
Hello, so my name is Miho. I identify myself as Vietnamese American.
My name's Manja. I was born here in Massachusetts, and I grew up in Mass my entire life.
So I'm MG Zhang. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm originally from Anchorage, Alaska, and now I live in Boston going to UMass. And I am a Hmong American.
My name's Sophia Moore. I'm a graduate student here at UMass Boston, majoring in exercise and health sciences. I'm in my first year, second semester of the graduate program, and I am half Asian American.
My name is Lauren Van Veen. I go to UMass Boston. I'm currently a sophomore, and I identify as half Filipino, half Dutch.
I think there is and there isn't a typical Asian American experience. I think there is a typical Asian American experience because when we hear about immigrant stories or refugee stories, they all share like a similar pattern of like either escaping war or coming to a land for a better opportunity.
I feel like as Asian Americans, we definitely share similar experiences, but each experience is very individualized.
I don't, and it took a lot of unlearning to realize that, especially with like the internalized model minority myth of we're all successful or more successful than other marginalized communities. Like pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, especially Asians that are immigrants or immigrant origin. And so I do my best to shy away from and diminish and very openly ridicule those stereotypes that categorize us all together. I think a lot of that comes through my activism in queer and trans communities, because there's widespread homophobia and transphobia within Asian communities and of course in the world at large, but a lot of my experiences within like my own family or different like cohorts that I've been around, there is a lot of homophobia and transphobia, and also like this misconception that like queer and Asian are can't coexist with one another. They're mutually exclusive. And so like I very much identify myself as a Hmong trans activist, and so carrying that Hmong identity with my trans identity and my trans activism kind of dispels those myths of the two identities being mutually exclusive, they don't interact, that Asian queer people don't exist. And so that's been a huge thing for me, is to bring more visibility, because growing up I didn't know anyone that looked like me that also identified as queer.
I've definitely felt a lot of stereotypes about being good at math, not being able to drive, not being able to see, and things of the sort. But it was definitely something that I had to get used to.
I don't, just because I think everyone's life is different and everyone has access to like different opportunities or disadvantages that they have in life, which makes each experience kind of unique.
And so when we think about the model minority myth, it stems from stereotypes, from different ways of how Asian Americans think. So like when I first think of like the word Asian, it's like all Asians are smart, they eat dogs. Like that was like my mindset in high school. But like as I got to learn more about like Asian Americans in the U.S. and also Asian Americans in like history, literature, and book, I realized that Asian Americans is such a like multifaceted, flexible intersectionality word, and so there's many things that embody like being Asian American. Like
I think a lot of it comes from like pitting minorities against each other, and it's all rooted in white supremacy because it's all to like cater to like capitalist notions of success and assimilation efforts to be American, and whatever that looks like. And so I would define it as an incredibly and sneakily oppressive way to bring Asian people down and Asian communities down, while not highlighting any of their successes. Growing up and not having, like, I'm a first generation college student, and a lot of my family is not formally educated, and many of which hold like conservative views on kind of like different aspects of the world. And so a way in which I have grown up seeing the model minority myth at play is how much anti-Blackness and racism there continues to be in Asian like families and conversations, because when Asian people are constantly told through the model minority myth that, you know, they are achieving success at higher rates than other minority groups, then it obliges Asian people to say, like, well, we're doing it right, so why can't you? And so then that leads to a lot of anti-Blackness and racism, even though, you know, there is no hierarchy of oppression.
I think of the model minority myth as a tool or a concept created by white America to create a divide within the community of color, and it's to pit Asian and Asian Americans against other groups of color to show that, hey, like, if these Asian people can do it, and they can do it by the, I guess, guidelines of white America, you can do it too. The model minority myth does affect me, and it affects me every day, because I have light skin. I'm what they see as Asian. Like I mentioned, like in history, like you mostly see representations of like Chinese, Vietnamese, Americans, and, you know, we don't talk about like other Asian minorities.
Just having no sense of community. I mean, yes, there's mostly white people, but there's definitely like community of Asians at my school. However, like they're like, oh, you don't look the part, so you can't really fit the part, or they're kind of like skeptical about like me hanging out with them.
Growing up in America as an Asian American, I would say it was confusing because my mom is first generation American. She came here to America first, and then I was born as a second generation. It was very difficult to balance the life I had at home, which was more of like a Vietnamese sort of household, and then the set of life that I had outside of home, which is more American.
Growing up Asian was tough because the public school I was in it was semi-diverse, but wasn't very diverse. There was a lot of white kids, a lot of people that had white privilege and didn't know it. I have a lot of questions about, like I said, like before, a lot of questions about when we were talking about slavery and things, they would always ask like, oh yeah, did they enslave like Indians or Asian people? And like, or they would always look at me whenever Indian people were referenced in historical textbooks or the classroom talked about Indians. They would always look at me for that, and I'd be like, I don't know anything. Why are you looking at me? I'm here to learn the same exact stuff as you. It was very frustrating in that regard of like, I'm not going to educate you on my culture.
The first time that I even kind of realized that my Asian identity was a thing, and that also like racism existed and anti-Asian racism existed, was in second grade. I was on the bus, and there was just one other student, because I was the last stop and he was the second to last stop, and as it was just us, he asked, and I was 7 years old. I had no idea how to answer, but he was like, like your mom, why don't you live in a trailer court? And I had no idea how to answer this, and I still honestly might not know how to answer this if I was confronted, but realizing that for the world at large, my Asian identity meant that I'm confined to a life in poverty. That was kind of my reckoning, where I was like, wow, I am Asian, other people perceive me as Asian, and these are the stereotypes in which they're going to inflict on me because of my identity. And so that, as a 7-year-old, that really propelled the internalized shame and internalized racism that I was feeling. And it took a while to get out of that.